Hello, I'm Alex. I'm 25 and I work in a small marketing company downtown. It's not a fancy job or anything, but it's steady and I like the people I work with. I live in a simple apartment, drive an old Honda, and I guess I'd call myself pretty normal. Nothing special really, just trying to get by without making too many waves. I grew up in this little town and never really thought much about leaving. My whole life was right here. Family, friends, familiar streets. It was easy, predictable until Sophia came along. Sophia and I started dating about 2 years ago. I'd known her since high school, though. We never talked much back then. She was popular, funny, and everyone liked her, whereas I mostly kept to myself. We connected again by chance at the grocery store one night, both reaching for the last tub of ice cream. It was a dumb, cheesy way to meet, but it worked. We talked for hours in the parking lot and 2 years later we were engaged. Sophia is the kind of girl everyone loves. She's beautiful but never tries too hard. Always smiling, always easygoing. We don't argue much, never really did with her. Things just make sense. She's safe, comfortable, and I love her for it. Last weekend, we had our engagement party at her house. It was supposed to be casual, just close friends, family, good food, and music in the backyard. Sophia's mom, Margaret, insisted on hosting. She'd always been generous like that. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret was my English teacher back in high school, and she was one of the few teachers who ever really saw me. Back then, I wasn't exactly a star student. I did okay, kept my head down, got decent grades, but Margaret made me feel like I had potential. She was one of those rare teachers who genuinely cared, the kind you never really forget. Even after high school, whenever I'd come over to see Sophia Margaret and I would end up talking about books or movies or just life in general, she was classy, elegant, and thoughtful in a way that always made me feel important. She's probably the most graceful woman I've ever met. The kind of woman who doesn't have to raise her voice because people listen anyway. I guess you could say I admired her. Anyway, the engagement party was going well. We had about 30 people, mostly family and friends. Sophia was busy laughing with her cousins, and I was chatting with some guys from work when Margaret walked over. She tapped me gently on the arm, smiling in that warm, familiar way she always did. "Alex," she said softly, "can I talk to you for a second?" "Sure," I replied, not thinking anything of it. She led me into the kitchen, away from the chatter and music. I noticed something different about her expression, though I couldn't quite place it. Margaret never looked nervous, but tonight there was an edge to her calmness, like she was hiding something behind those steady, gentle eyes. "I wanted to tell you something." She began, leaning slightly against the kitchen counter. She was wearing a simple navy blue dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She was effortlessly beautiful, the way older women sometimes are comfortable in their own skin, confident without trying. "What's up?" I asked lightly, assuming it was something about Sophia, or maybe just party details. She hesitated, looking at the floor for a moment before lifting her gaze back to mine. "I've never told Sophia this, Alex. In fact, I haven't really told anyone. But you're going to be family soon, and I feel like you deserve to know the truth." I felt my heartbeat a little faster, confused. Margaret never got this serious without reason. "Is something wrong?" I asked carefully. She took a slow, quiet breath and smiled softly, almost sadly. "Sophia's father and I aren't married anymore," she finally said. "We haven't been for a few years now." I stared at her, stunned. This wasn't at all what I'd expected to hear. I'd just seen him earlier standing with Sophia's uncles, laughing as if nothing had changed. "But why haven't you told her?" Margaret shook her head slightly. "We both agreed it would be easier on her to just pretend for now. We didn't want her to feel like she'd lost her family, especially not at a time like this. She's been so happy since you two got together, Alex. Neither of us wanted to ruin that." I didn't know what to say. Everything I'd believed about Sophia's family suddenly felt shaky, uncertain. "But why tell me now?" I finally asked. Margaret looked away for a moment, thoughtful. "Because I trust you," she said quietly. "Sophia adores you, and I can see why. You're good, Alex. You're kind, and you deserve to know the truth. But please don't tell Sophia." "Not yet." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her trust pressing heavily on my shoulders. I won't, I promise softly, but I still don't understand. How did you manage to hide something like this for so long? Margaret smiled sadly. People see what they want to see, she said gently. Sometimes it's easier to keep pretending than it is to face the truth. I guess we were both good at pretending. For a long moment, we stood quietly in the kitchen, distant laughter and music filtering in from the yard. Something about the intimacy of the moment. Margaret sharing a secret she'd kept from everyone else made me feel oddly closer to her in a way I never expected. Margaret placed a soft hand on my arm, squeezing gently. "Thank you for listening, Alex," she whispered. "I knew you'd understand." She left the kitchen, her footsteps soft and graceful. As always, leaving me alone with a head full of questions and a strange feeling deep inside my chest. One that I couldn't quite name yet. Returning to the party, everything suddenly felt different. I smiled when Sophia waved at me, but something inside me had shifted. Every time I glanced toward Margaret, I felt a tug of uncertainty, guilt, and something else. Something that scared me. As I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help wondering why Margaret had chosen me to share her secret and why, despite my best efforts, I couldn't get her voice out of my mind. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about Margaret, about everything she'd said. Her voice echoed quietly through my mind. "I trust you, Alex. Sophia doesn't know yet. Please don't say anything." Sophia's father, Robert, had always seemed like a quiet man, distant but decent. He rarely spoke at family gatherings, usually just smiling politely, sipping his drink and leaving early. I always assumed that was just his personality. It never crossed my mind they'd been pretending all these years. Suddenly, every memory I had of them seemed slightly off, somehow less genuine. The next morning, Sophia cooked breakfast, her laughter filling our small kitchen. She had no clue. She looked so happy flipping pancakes and talking about wedding plans. It felt wrong keeping something like this from her. But I'd promised Margaret. I couldn't betray her trust. Not now. "You okay, Alex?" Sophia asked suddenly, noticing how quiet I'd become. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired from yesterday." Sophia grinned and kissed me on the cheek. "You were amazing. Mom said you were a huge help, especially in the kitchen." Hearing Margaret's name made my stomach tighten. "She did?" I asked quietly, looking away. Sophia nodded, smiling softly. "She really likes you, you know. She always tells me how lucky I am." I looked down, pushing food around my plate. "Yeah, she's great." Sophia laughed lightly. "I swear sometimes it feels like Mom loves you even more than I do." She said it jokingly, but her words lingered heavy in the air between us. After breakfast, Sophia left to meet her friends for coffee. Alone again, my thoughts went straight back to Margaret. Why had she confided in me of all people? Why choose me, the guy marrying her daughter I was supposed to be part of their family soon, not someone holding secrets behind Sophia's back? Later that afternoon, I drove aimlessly around town. I ended up at the park sitting alone on an old wooden bench, staring at nothing in particular. My phone buzzed suddenly, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Margaret. A simple text. "Thank you again, Alex, for understanding." I stared at her words for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure how to reply. Eventually, I typed, "Of course, I'm here if you need anything." She didn't respond, and I couldn't help feeling strangely disappointed. The next few days passed quietly. Sophia noticed my distracted mood a few more times, but assumed I was just stressed about the wedding. She kept telling me it would all be perfect, and I let her believe that was my worry. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Margaret, about her confession, about the quiet sadness I'd seen in her eyes. That Friday evening, Sophia went out with her bridesmaids. I was alone at home when Margaret called. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Alex," she said quietly, "I was wondering if you're free tonight. There's something else I'd like to talk to you about." My chest tightened instantly. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where should we meet?" "Maybe just come by my house," Margaret suggested gently. "Sophia won't be home till late." I agreed, feeling guilty for reasons I couldn't fully explain. It was just a conversation. I reminded myself just Margaret needing someone to talk to, but I knew deep down there was more. Why else would my heart beat so fast when I heard her voice? When I arrived at Margaret's house, the porch light was already on. She opened the door, smiling softly, wearing a casual sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back loosely. It was strange seeing her so relaxed, not the elegant, put-together woman I knew from all those family events. We sat in the living room quiet for a few moments before she finally spoke. "I'm sorry if this is awkward for you, Alex," she started gently. "But you're the only one I can really talk to." "I don't mind," I said quickly, trying to sound more confident than I felt. She sighed softly, shaking her head. "I feel guilty about putting this burden on you, but I don't have anyone else. Robert and I agreed not to involve Sophia or anyone else until after your wedding." I hesitated before asking, "Why me, though? You could have told one of your friends." Margaret smiled faintly, looking down at her hands. "You're different, Alex. You've always been someone I respected deeply. Even when you were a kid, I knew I could trust you." My heartbeat quickened slightly. "I just wish Sophia knew," I admitted quietly. "I feel awful keeping this from her." "I know," Margaret whispered, reaching out to gently touch my arm. Her hand was warm, comforting, but something about her touch made my chest tighten even more. "But Sophia isn't like you. She's strong, yes, but emotionally fragile. I don't want her carrying this pain. Not yet." I looked up, meeting Margaret's steady gaze. "Does it hurt you?" I asked softly, keeping the secret, pretending everything's fine. She hesitated, looking away for a moment. "Yes," she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "More than anyone knows. Pretending to be happy is exhausting." Without thinking, I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Margaret." She looked back at me, her eyes glistening slightly. "It's strange," she said softly. "You're marrying my daughter, but sometimes it feels like you're the only one who truly understands me." I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. "I just want you to be okay," I whispered awkwardly, not knowing what else to say. Margaret smiled softly, sadly. "I will be eventually, but right now, just having someone who listens, who sees me, is enough." We sat quietly for a long moment, neither of us speaking. The silence was filled with things we weren't saying, things we couldn't admit even to ourselves. Eventually, Margaret pulled her hand away, gently breaking the quiet spell between us. "You should go," she whispered. "Sophia will be home soon." I stood up reluctantly, feeling the strange closeness fade. "If you need anything, I know," she interrupted softly, smiling faintly. "Thank you, Alex." Walking to my car, I glanced back at her, standing in the doorway watching me go. As I drove away, my thoughts raced. I knew this was dangerous territory, but I couldn't deny the strange sense of connection I'd felt tonight. Something deeper than respect, deeper than friendship. And as guilty as I felt, part of me knew this was only the beginning of something I didn't fully understand yet. After that evening at Margaret's house, things didn't quite go back to normal. Not for me, anyway. I couldn't shake the feeling of her hand resting softly on mine or the sadness behind her eyes as she'd whispered those quiet confessions. I told myself I was just being supportive, just trying to help someone I cared about. But deep down, I knew something else was happening, something I wasn't ready to admit. Over the next few weeks, Margaret started texting me more frequently. It was subtle at first, short messages asking about my day or if Sophia was around, innocent, harmless conversations, but slowly they became more personal. She would ask me what I thought about her decisions, about her future, about life. She'd always preface it the same way. "I just need a man's perspective of Alex, someone mature enough to give honest advice." Every time I read those words, I'd feel a strange mix of guilt and curiosity. Why did she value my opinion so much? And why did I look forward to those messages even though I knew I shouldn't? One evening, Sophia was working late, and I was home alone when Margaret called. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant as she spoke. "Hey, Alex, do you have a minute? I need your advice again." I sat down on the couch, feeling my pulse quicken. Of course. What's it going on? She sighed gently. Robert wants us to pretend a little longer, at least until after your wedding. He thinks it'll be easier for Sophia. I hesitated, not sure what to say. Do you think that's a good idea? I honestly don't know, she admitted quietly. That's why I'm calling you. Would it be wrong to keep pretending? Alex, do you think I'm hurting her more by protecting her? I paused, feeling the weight of the situation again. I think you should do what's best for you, Margaret, I finally said, choosing my words carefully. Sophia's strong. She can handle it. There was silence for a moment, and I worried I'd said something wrong. You really think so? She finally asked, her voice, almost a whisper. I do, I said softly. And no matter what, I'll be here to help you both. Margaret let out a soft sigh. Thank you, Alex. You don't know how much that means to me. After we hung up, I sat quietly, feeling a strange ache deep in my chest. I knew I should tell Sophia, but every time I tried, I remembered the trust Margaret had placed in me. It felt impossible to betray her confidence. The conversations kept happening. More texts, occasional calls, casual meetings for coffee. Each time, the distance between us grew smaller, our conversations more personal. Soon, we weren't just talking about Sophia or their divorce anymore. We were talking about our lives, our dreams, even our regrets. One afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe outside town. Margaret wore a simple white blouse and jeans, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked relaxed, younger somehow, and when she smiled at me, something in my chest tightened unexpectedly. You know? She began softly sipping her coffee. I never imagined I'd be here discussing my life choices with someone your age. I laughed awkwardly, suddenly self-conscious. Sorry if I'm not exactly an expert on relationships. Margaret reached out gently, placing her hand over mine on the table. Don't underestimate yourself, Alex. You're wiser than most men I've known. My heart jumped slightly at her touch. I knew it was innocent, just a gesture of comfort. But it felt different somehow, warmer, more intimate. I just wish I'd made different choices. She continued, her voice quieter now. Maybe things wouldn't have gotten so complicated. I hesitated before speaking. You can't blame yourself for everything, Margaret. Sometimes life just happens. She looked up, her eyes, meeting mine, gentle and searching. You're always so understanding. Sophia's lucky she found you. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling guilty again. Maybe I'm the lucky one, I said quietly, looking down at her hand, still touching mine. Margaret slowly withdrew her hand, looking slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry, she murmured softly. I shouldn't be burdening you with all this. It's okay, I said quickly, trying to ignore the sudden emptiness where her hand had been. I want to help. Margaret smiled softly, but her eyes remained uncertain. I just don't want you to feel obligated. Alex, you have your own life, your own happiness, so to focus on. I shook my head gently. Talking to you doesn't feel like an obligation, I admitted quietly. I like it. She looked surprised but pleased. Really? Yeah, I said softly. You're easy to talk to, Margaret, and you're honest. I appreciate that. She smiled warmly again. But this time there was something else in her eyes, something gentle and vulnerable. Sometimes I wish I'd met someone like you years ago, she said, her voice barely audible. Her words hung between us, heavy with meaning. We both sat quietly, neither of us knowing what to say next. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. We should go, she said softly, standing slowly. Sophia will be home soon, right? I nodded, standing up reluctantly. Yeah, you're right. We walked together toward the parking lot, the silence between us comfortable, but charged. At her car, Margaret paused, turning to face me again. Alex, she said gently, looking up at me. Seriously, I want you to know how grateful I am for your advice, for your friendship, for everything. I smiled softly. You don't have to thank me, Margaret. I'm glad I can be here for you. She hesitated for a second, then leaned in, slightly, hugging me gently. Her touch felt warm, comforting, and I couldn't help but hold her close for just a moment too long. When we finally stepped back, our eyes met briefly, and the softness in her gaze made my heart beat faster. "Take care, Alex," she whispered softly. "And please don't ever change." As I drove home that evening and realized something had shifted inside me, Margaret wasn't just Sophia's mom, wasn't just someone I respected anymore. She was someone I looked forward to seeing, someone I felt connected to in a way I'd never expected. That realization scared me more than anything. I was supposed to marry Sophia, soon build a life with her, not find myself feeling strangely drawn to her mother. Yet, despite everything, I couldn't deny it anymore. Margaret had become more than just a friend, and deep down, I knew this feeling was far from over. After that afternoon at the cafe, I knew I had to put some distance between myself and Margaret. I felt guilty every time I thought of Sophia, innocent and trusting, busy planning a future with me that suddenly seemed less clear. I had to do something before these strange feelings spiraled out of control. So I began to avoid Margaret. Not obviously, of course, just small things. When she texted me, I'd reply briefly, politely. When she called, I'd let it ring, texting later that I'd been busy. I skipped out on dinners at Sophia's house, using work or fatigue as excuses. I thought distance would make these feelings fade, restore my focus, remind me of who I was supposed to be. But it didn't work that way. Instead, the more I distanced myself, the more I could feel the quiet sadness creeping into Margaret's messages. Her text became shorter, filled with apologies, always ending with something polite like, "I understand. Take care." I imagined her sitting alone feeling rejected, and it hurt more deeply than I had expected. Sophia noticed my mood changes. One night after dinner, she reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "You okay, Alex?" she asked softly. "You seem distant lately." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a small smile. "Just stressed about the wedding." She nodded, concern filling her eyes. "I just want you to be happy. That's all I ever wanted." I squeezed her hand back, feeling another surge of guilt. Sophia deserves someone better, someone who wasn't hiding secrets. But what could I say? Telling her about Margaret felt impossible now. Too painful. Too complicated. Late one night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed quietly on the bedside table. I reached over, expecting a meaningless notification, but my heart jumped when I saw Margaret's name on the screen. Her message was simple, quiet, and heavy with unspoken pain. "I'm sorry if I've complicated things. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." I stared at the screen, my throat tight. Margaret didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve to feel alone. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed slowly. "You didn't. I've just been trying to do the right thing," she replied quickly, her words hitting me harder than I'd imagined. "I understand. I'll give you space, but please don't blame yourself. This is on me." I felt a pang of sadness. Margaret was shouldering the blame, but I knew I was equally responsible. Every instinct told me to let her go. Let this die quietly. But something inside rebelled at the thought of losing her completely. I sat up in bed, my heart beating faster. After a long hesitation, I typed again, letting honesty win. "Maybe we should talk face to face." A pause, then her answer. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I typed, my heart hammering. "Tomorrow." She agreed, and we planned to meet at her place after Sophia left for work. The next day dragged by painfully slow. At work, my mind kept drifting, every thought circling back to Margaret, to the sadness in her voice, the uncertainty in my chest. When evening finally came, I drove slowly to Margaret's house, anxiety and anticipation making my palms sweat. Margaret opened the door quietly, dressed simply in a soft gray sweater. Her eyes looked tired, red-rimmed like she'd been crying. We stood silently for a moment, just looking at each other. Finally, she stepped back, letting me inside. "Thank you for coming, Alex," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. "I wasn't sure you would actually show up. I admitted quietly. I didn't want you to think this was all your fault." Margaret sighed gently, guiding me into the living room. We sat down awkwardly on opposite sides of the couch. the distance between us suddenly painful. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, breaking the silence. "I never wanted this to happen. You're marrying my daughter, and I'm just complicating your life." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Margaret, you're not alone in this. I'm responsible, too. I should have been stronger." She shook her head, smiling sadly. "You've done nothing wrong. You're a good man, Alex. Better than I deserve." I looked away, feeling my throat tighten again. "I don't know what's happening," I admitted softly. "I never expected to feel this way." She looked up sharply, surprise flickering across her face. "Feel what way?" I hesitated, swallowing hard before answering honestly. "Close to you. Too close. Scares me, Margaret." Her expression softened in understanding, filling her eyes. "Scares me too," she admitted quietly. "But I can't deny how important you've become to me." I closed my eyes briefly, overwhelmed by her honesty. "We can't do this," I whispered painfully. "It's not fair to Sophia." "I know," Margaret agreed softly, her voice barely audible. "But losing you completely, it hurts, Alex." Without thinking, I moved closer, reaching out to gently take her hand. Her fingers trembled slightly in mine. "We won't lose each other," I promised softly. "We'll figure this out somehow. I just can't abandon Sophia." Margaret squeezed my hand gently. "I wouldn't ask you to," she whispered. "But please don't shut me out. Even if it's just friendship, I need you, Alex." We sat quietly, holding hands in silent agreement, unsure what our future held. I felt torn, desperately wanting to protect Sophia's happiness, but equally desperate not to lose Margaret's presence in my life. Eventually, we stood up reluctantly, knowing Sophia would soon be home. At the doorway, Margaret paused, looking up at me again, her eyes searching mine. "Can we really stay just friends?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But we can try. P." She nodded slowly, accepting my words. "Then we'll try." As I walked to my car, I glanced back once more. Margaret stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the soft glow from inside her house, watching me with gentle sadness. I waved slowly, and she raised her hand slightly, a quiet goodbye lingering between us. Driving home, I knew this wasn't the end. Our attempt at friendship felt fragile, uncertain, but at least we weren't losing each other entirely. I knew it wasn't perfect, knew it was risky and complicated, but something about Margaret made me believe it might still be worth it. And that realization scared and comforted me in equal measure. I knew one thing for certain. This was far from over, and the hardest decisions were yet to come. A few weeks passed quietly after that evening at Margaret's house. We maintained a careful, respectful distance. It was safer that way, better for everyone, especially Sophia. But deep down, we both knew we were fooling ourselves. Every casual glance, every small smile when our eyes met, told me the connection between us was still there, unspoken and dangerous. Then came the weekend. Sophia had to leave town for a work conference. She asked if I'd be okay staying alone, kissing me gently before she left, never knowing the turmoil beneath my calm exterior. As I watched her drive away, a strange, restless anxiety settled inside me. That same afternoon, Margaret texted me. I stared at her message longer than I should have. "Alex, I know this might be a lot to ask, but a few things around the house need fixing. Would you mind helping?" I knew what I should have replied. Something polite, something safe, an excuse, but my fingers typed it almost automatically. "Of course, I'll come by this evening." When I arrived at Margaret's house, she greeted me quietly, smiling softly. "Thank you for coming, Alex. I know you're busy." "It's no trouble," I said gently, trying to keep things casual. "Sophia's away, so my evening's open." Margaret nodded slowly, glancing away briefly before leading me inside. We spent the next hour fixing little things around the house. A squeaky door hinge, a loose cabinet handle, a flickering lamp. Small tasks, but it gave us an excuse to avoid deeper conversation. When we finally finished, Margaret offered a faint smile. "You're very good at this. You know, Sophia is lucky she'll have someone handy around." I laughed softly, a little embarrassed. "It's nothing special." She paused, watching me thoughtfully. Would you like a glass of wine before you go, just to thank you properly? I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Sure, that sounds nice. Margaret poured us each a glass of deep red wine, and we moved to the living room, sitting quietly on the couch. The atmosphere felt comfortable at first, but gradually the silence grew heavier, filled with everything we weren't saying. Finally, Margaret broke the quiet. You know, Alex, sometimes I wonder how different life would have been if I'd made better choices. I looked up, noticing the gentle sadness in her eyes. What do you mean? She sighed softly, swirling the wine gently in her glass. My marriage was never as happy as everyone believed. Robert was never cruel or bad, just indifferent. We stayed together out of habit, out of fear of disappointing Sophia. But for years I felt lonely and visible. Her honesty surprised me. My heart tightened painfully as I listened. Without thinking, I reached out gently, touching her hand. I'm sorry you went through that, Margaret. No one deserves to feel lonely. Her eyes softened as she looked down at our hands, fingers gently entwined. Her voice was barely audible when she whispered, "Why couldn't I meet someone like you years ago?" My pulse quickened at her words. Everything I tried to suppress suddenly came flooding back, overwhelming me. Margaret was close now, closer than she'd ever been. Her gentle scent filled my senses, her hand warm and soft in mine. "Margaret," I whispered uncertainly, feeling my self-control slipping away. "We shouldn't." She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly closer, eyes never leaving mine. I know, she breathed softly. But for once, Alex, can we just admit how we feel? My heart pounded fiercely as I fought a silent battle within myself. Loyalty to Sophia warred violently with my deep, undeniable feelings for Margaret. I knew I should end this before it went any further, but my body refused to move. Every fiber of my being yearned to stay. "Margaret," I said again, voice trembling slightly. "Sophia," she interrupted gently, eyes filled with quiet sadness. "Sophia deserves better than lies. And so do we. Even if it's only for tonight, I just want honesty. I need to know I'm not imagining this." "You're not," I admitted painfully, unable to hold back any longer. "I feel it too." Her eyes glistened softly, relief and sadness mixed together. Slowly, she leaned into me, resting her head gently against my shoulder. Her closeness felt natural, comforting, even as my guilt rose sharply. "I've tried so hard to resist this," Margaret murmured softly, her breath warm against my skin. "But being with you feels like finally breathing again." Her words broke down my last defenses. I gently wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her close. We sat quietly, neither of us daring to move, afraid to shatter this fragile moment. Eventually, Margaret lifted her head slightly, her face inches from mine. "I shouldn't want this," she whispered softly, her gaze locked onto mine. "But I can't help it, Alex. You've made me feel alive again." I felt myself lean in instinctively, our lips almost touching before reality crashed back into me. I pulled away sharply, heart aching. "I can't do this to Sophia," I said painfully, standing up quickly. "It's not right." Margaret stood slowly, eyes filled with understanding and regret. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Alex. I shouldn't have." I shook my head, feeling tears sting my eyes. "It's not your fault, Margaret. It's mine too. I wanted it. I want you, but it's still wrong." Margaret nodded sadly, stepping back slightly. "Then you should go." I moved reluctantly toward the door, feeling each step heavier than the last. At the threshold, I turned back once more, my voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Margaret," I whispered softly. She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Don't apologize. I'll never regret being honest with you." As I drove away, my chest felt unbearably heavy, my thoughts spiraling in confusion. I'd nearly crossed an irreversible line tonight, driven by feelings I never imagined possible. Yet beneath the guilt and pain, I couldn't deny how alive Margaret had made me feel. It was a cruel irony, finally experiencing real passion and connection, but at the wrong time with the wrong person. Back home, alone in the quiet emptiness of our apartment. I lay awake in bed, haunted by Margaret's soft voice, by the memory of her warmth beside me. I knew I'd done the right thing by pulling away, but the ache in my heart told me clearly that right or wrong, my feelings weren't going anywhere. As the night deepened around me, one painful question lingered, refusing to leave my mind. If I truly loved Sophia, why had I allowed myself to fall so deeply for her mother? And how would I ever find my way back? In the days following that night at Margaret's house, guilt consumed me. I couldn't look Sophia in the eye without feeling a wave of shame washing over me. Every smile she offered, every gentle touch felt undeserved. And yet, I couldn't tell her the truth, not without shattering her heart completely. Margaret and I both seemed to silently agree that we needed space. She stopped texting and calling. I avoided places I knew she might be. The closeness we'd shared now felt dangerous, like a fragile secret that threatened to destroy everything. But Sophia noticed one evening while preparing dinner. She watched me quietly from across the kitchen. I could feel her eyes studying me, uncertain and worried. "Alex," she finally said, breaking the silence. "Are we okay?" I looked up quickly, forcing a small, reassuring smile. "Of course. Why wouldn't we be?" She hesitated, frowning slightly. "You've been distant lately." "Ever since my trip, actually. Did something happen?" I felt my heart clenched painfully. "I'm just stressed." I lied softly. "Work and wedding planning, it's a lot." Sophia stepped closer, wrapping her arms around me gently. "I just want us to be honest with each other. You'd tell me if something was really wrong, right?" I held her tightly, feeling another stab of guilt. "Always," I whispered silently, hating myself for the lie. The hardest part was knowing I'd have to see Margaret again. We had a family dinner planned at Sophia's parents' house that weekend. A small, intimate gathering. Sophia was excited, talking eagerly about how good it would be for all of us to relax together. But for me, every mention of that night felt like another nail in the coffin. When the evening arrived, my nerves were raw. Margaret greeted us at the door with a polite, careful smile, her eyes meeting mine briefly before quickly looking away. She seemed composed, but beneath the surface, I sensed she felt as guilty and conflicted as I did. Dinner was pleasant enough, but every exchange felt strained, cautious. Margaret spoke softly, barely making eye contact with me, focusing instead on Sophia. But even Sophia seemed to notice something off, glancing between us with subtle concern. Halfway through the meal, Sophia's phone rang, a quick call from her friend. She excused herself briefly, stepping outside onto the patio, leaving Margaret and me alone at the table. The silence felt deafening. Margaret finally broke at, her voice quiet and heavy. "Alex," she said softly, still not looking directly at me. "I know what you're thinking. You're right. We can't continue this." I swallowed hard, feeling relief mingled with sadness. "Margaret," she interrupted gently, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were filled with pain and resignation. "We both know this has to stop, but for what it's worth, you've reminded me of what happiness feels like." Her words twisted painfully in my chest. I realized then just how deeply I'd hurt her, how deeply we'd both hurt each other by allowing ourselves this fleeting closeness. "I'm so sorry," I whispered quietly, my voice breaking slightly. "I never wanted you to feel this way." Margaret reached out briefly, touching my hand. Gentle, comforting, and heartbreakingly brief. "You don't need to apologize, Alex. This wasn't just you. I knew better." I stared at her, feeling my chest tighten further. "I just wish things were different." She nodded softly, smiling sadly. "Me too. But Sophia deserves the truth, and she deserves you." Before I could reply, Sophia returned cheerful and unaware, chatting lightly about plans for the rest of the weekend. Margaret resumed smiling politely, pretending once again that everything was normal. But behind her gentle facade, I saw a quiet loneliness, a sadness that made me ache with guilt. Later that night, back home, I lay awake beside Sophia, my mind racing. I knew Margaret was right. This had to end fully and completely, no matter how much it hurt. Sophia trusted me, She believed in us. Betraying her was never something I thought myself capable of. And yet, I'd come dangerously close. For the next several days, I immersed myself completely in work and wedding preparations, desperate for distraction. Margaret and I didn't speak again, not even small texts. Our silence felt both necessary and painful, a constant reminder of what we'd almost lost ourselves to. One evening, Sophia curled up beside me on the couch, gently laying her head against my shoulder. "Mom's been acting strange lately," she said softly, quiet, withdrawn. "Have you noticed?" My heart quickened slightly. No, I lied carefully. Maybe she's just stressed about the wedding. Sophia frowned slightly. "I don't know. She just seems sad, lonely, maybe. I worry about her." Her words twisted inside me, knowing all too well the cause of Margaret's sadness. "She'll be okay," I whispered, hoping desperately it was true. "Maybe you should spend more time with her. She probably just misses you." Sophia nodded thoughtfully, seemingly reassured. "You're right. I'll talk to her tomorrow." I kissed her forehead softly, silently, promising myself that I would never again betray her trust. I couldn't bear to see the confusion or pain in her eyes, knowing I'd put it there. That night, when Sophia was asleep, I quietly got out of bed, unable to calm my restless thoughts. Standing by the window, looking out into the silent night, I picked up my phone, hesitating briefly before typing a simple message to Margaret. "You're right. We can't do this anymore. But please know I'm here for you as family, as a friend." Margaret replied a few minutes later, her message short, but filled with quiet understanding. "Thank you, Alex. That means more than you'll ever know." I stared at her words for a long moment, feeling a deep sadness settle over me. I knew we'd made the right decision, that we had narrowly avoided a disaster that could have destroyed everything. But beneath the relief, beneath the guilt, I couldn't help mourning what we'd lost, the brief, genuine connection that had made us both feel alive. I returned quietly to bed, lying awake, listening to Sophia's soft breathing beside me. I realized then that no matter how hard I tried, no matter how sincerely I loved Sophia, I'd never forget the fragile happiness I'd found and lost with Margaret. And that realization scared me more deeply than anything else. A few weeks passed, but nothing felt easier. The heaviness in my chest remained a constant reminder of everything I'd lost and everything I stood to lose. Sophia continued making wedding plans, her excitement genuine. Yet, every detail felt increasingly suffocating. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. One rainy afternoon, I finally sat Sophia down in our living room. Her eyes widened with concern as I struggled to find the right words. "Sophia," I began softly, barely meeting her gaze. "I think we need to postpone the wedding." She went silent for a long moment, confusion spreading slowly across her face. "Why? What's wrong?" "Alex, did I do something?" "No." I quickly interrupted, my voice breaking slightly. "It's not you, it's me. I just need some time. I'm confused." Her expression shifted from confusion to hurt, then finally settled on sadness. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Is it someone else?" Her question hit me hard, twisting painfully inside my chest. I didn't lie, but I couldn't fully admit the truth either. "I just need time," I repeated quietly, desperate for her to understand. "Please, Sophia." She didn't push further, but tears filled her eyes as she quietly left the room. Watching her walk away felt like a knife twisting deeper, but I knew I had no other choice. 2 days later, I packed a small bag and left town. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going, just that I needed space to think. Driving away from the familiar streets felt both painful and necessary. As though distance might offer clarity I couldn't find at home. I spent those weeks alone in a quiet cabin by the coast, surrounded only by the rhythm of waves and the endless empty sky. Each day, I walked the shoreline, replaying every moment, every decision, trying to untangle the mess of emotions that haunted me. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived at the cabin, neatly addressed in Margaret's familiar handwriting. My heart quickened as I opened it, finding a brief note inside. "Dear Alex, I know you needed space, and I'm sorry for everything that happened. You deserve happiness above all else, and I never intended to complicate your life. Take your time to find your answer. I'll understand whatever you decide. Always, Margaret. Her words left me sitting in silence for hours, feeling both comforted and tormented by her kindness. Margaret deserved happiness too, perhaps more than anyone. And yet, I knew choosing her meant breaking Sophia's heart, something I could never forgive myself for. Days turned into weeks, and I slowly began to understand something painful but important. This decision wasn't about who I loved more. It was about who I wanted to become. About responsibility, duty, passion, and sacrifice. Each choice came with pain, each path uncertain. Eventually, I realized running away wouldn't help anymore. I had to face this head-on, no matter how difficult. When I finally returned home, dusk was settling softly over the town. Streetlights flickered gently as I drove slowly through familiar streets, my heart beating anxiously. I parked near the intersection between Margaret and Sophia's houses, stepping slowly onto the quiet sidewalk. Standing between those two homes, I felt the weight of my choice pressing heavily upon me. To my left was Sophia, steady, loving, innocent. Choosing her meant stability, comfort, the life I'd always planned. To my right was Margaret, the woman who had unexpectedly awakened. Something deep and passionate inside me, something I never knew existed. I stood frozen in the evening air, cool against my skin, memories flooding my mind. Sophia represented the life I'd always envisioned, predictable, safe, happy. But after everything that had happened, could we ever regain what we'd lost? Could I truly be the person she deserved? Margaret, on the other hand, represented risk, passion, uncertainty. Our bond was powerful, undeniable, but was it sustainable? Or would choosing her only lead to the more heartbreak and pain for everyone involved? I closed my eyes briefly, breathing deeply. How could I possibly make this choice? Sophia's house was warm lights glowing softly through familiar windows. Inside waited security, love, and forgiveness. If only I could let go of the guilt that now bound me so tightly. Margaret's house sat quiet, gently illuminated, and somehow lonely. Behind its walls lay passion, connection, and a depth of feeling I'd never imagined possible. But choosing Margaret meant crossing a line I could never uncross, hurting Sophia beyond measure. Minutes stretched painfully as I stood there trapped in an agonizing limbo. I knew this decision would define my life, shaping every moment that followed. My heart pounding heavily, each beat echoing my confusion and fear. What was love truly? Was it comfort and loyalty? Or was it passion and connection? And which was worth sacrificing for the other? The sky darkened above me, stars beginning to shine softly indifferent to my struggle. The truth was neither path was without pain. Either choice would come at a cost, hurting someone I deeply cared about. In that quiet moment, I finally understood the cruelty of love. Not the joy it brought, but the impossible decisions it forced us to make. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I realized there was no easy answer, no clear path forward. All I had was my heart torn and uncertain, and the knowledge that whichever direction I chose, I would carry the weight of this decision forever. Slowly, I took one step forward, then another, feeling the night close gently around me. But even as I began to move, my destination remained uncertain. My heart caught painfully between two truths, two loves, two lies. And as I walked, I knew that no matter which house I chose, a part of me would forever remain standing right here in this moment, caught between happiness and duty, passion and responsibility, never truly free of the impossible choice I'd faced. The night deepened, and I continued moving forward, knowing only that my heart would never fully belong to one home. The story of Alex, Sophia, and Margaret unveils a heart-wrenching life lesson. Love can be both a source of profound connection and an agonizing force that demands impossible choices. Alex's unexpected bond with Margaret, built on trust and shared vulnerability, awakened a passion he never anticipated. Yet it clashed painfully with his commitment to Sophia. This tale teaches us that love is not always clear-cut. It can pull us in conflicting directions, forcing us to weigh loyalty against desire, duty against passion. Alex's struggle highlights the courage it takes to confront our true feelings, even when they risk hurting those we care about most. His decision to step back, though excruciating, underscores the importance of honesty with ourselves and others when navigating life's moral complexities. This story reminds us to cherish the connections that make us feel alive, but to tread carefully when they threaten to unravel the lives we've built. It's a call to reflect on our own choices, to embrace empathy, and to seek clarity amid emotional turmoil. Have you ever faced a choice between heart and duty? Share your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear how you navigated life's tough decisions. If this story stirred your emotions, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join our community. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. So, let's explore the complexities of love and life together.